Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a link down below to officehours.global. You can find out more about what we do there. First hour is general media and discussion. So media, virtual production, all those things are things that we talk about here. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little time on. We're switching over to Office Hours 2.0 next week. Well, it's going to be a soft switch, more of a slow slide, hopefully not too painful. So we're going to be sliding into 2.0 starting next week. And so we'll talk a little bit about what we'd like to see in second hours and what we'd like to see even in the first hours in the process. And so we'll be dealing with that today. Tomorrow we'll be focused on education at 8 o'clock. And remember that we don't stream that. So we will... So that'll be something you need to be on Zoom for. Then at noon, in its own event, you'll see the link in what we send out. You'll see the Belfast project. We're going to be back in Belfast noon tomorrow, and you'll get to see how this remote takeover actually happens. So check that out at noon. Also, a reminder that the email that's going out every day has a link. We're going to start getting into embedded programming, and so there's kind of we're trying to see who might be interested in that, and there's a link there for you can find out more information about that at the top of the email, as well as a place for you to sign up and say that you're interested in actually doing it. The class, we don't care how big the class is because I know that I'm going. so I'm like, anybody else who wants to come can come. So anyway, so we think it'll be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's jump into the questions.
Host, please.
Yes, Leo.
Jason Robert Shaw from Saracosa in Florida. Is there a standardized way to count virtual program attendees? Does someone have to attend for a certain length of time? Do you count live attendees separately from those watching the recording? And finally, how to count when a group watches from a single login?
You really gotten into the mix of the problem with a lot of virtual events and trying to standardize all of that. There is no one standard. People have tried to build podcasting alliances and streaming alliances to try to find some. Probably, I think YouTube probably has the most strict version of that, and I believe that YouTube won't count it unless you actually take an action and watch it for 30 seconds. I don't know if that's still the rule, but for a long time it wasn't counted as a view unless they took an action, which means they hit play. Now I think on YouTube, on the site itself, if it auto plays, they don't require that. But if you embed a video and if any autoplay for a long time, and I don't know if it's still the case, but a long time YouTube didn't count that as a view. So anyway, which surprised a lot of our audience. We'd have clients that put something on a huge website that they get millions of millions of views, and they have like 4 views, and they'd be like, "What happened?" And that was what happened. So anyway, you have to kind of take that into account. So 30 seconds is often seen as a minimum for YouTube. 10 seconds, I think, Facebook counts as everything. They just like everything that we can possibly count, we're going to count. But they'll tell you what's over 10 seconds, what's over other, there's other numbers that they start to throw towards you. The thing that we pay attention to, or that I pay a lot of attention to, is average view time. So once someone is up there, how long is the average view time? In Facebook, that's usually measured in seconds. Usually, if you get to 60 seconds, you're doing a pretty good job. In YouTube, average that we see over the last 10 years is about 6.5, 7 minutes. But it really depends on what you're doing. So, for instance, with Office Hours, our average view time inside of Zoom is just short of 80 minutes. So, which is they astronomically high for most measurements. And so it just depends on how you structure it. Go ahead, Rupert.
I just wanted to add a couple of anecdotes. I was working with somebody this week who have an LMS integrated into Zoom, and the LMS was set up such that for somebody to get a passing grade, they needed to be in attendance in the meeting for at least 60 or 70 or something % of the duration. So there's people out there kind of working on ways to calculate this. And also just recently, I think Zoom Rooms implemented a feature where it can count the number of people in the room, which might just be interesting in a sort of related way, whether they're going to build that into later, actually attaching names to those people so that you can pull that out in the report later. Don't know.
Well, the data is there. So the data in the back end is there to gather it. So while Zoom doesn't necessarily, I think that Zoom's data reporting is the raw data is kind of stunning. The the processing of that data and the display of that data is pretty bad. Like they show you very little as far as graphs and so on and so forth. They show some. I know there's some of the stuff that's good, and they if you go drill down to a person, it'll show their connectivity and everything else in a nice little graph. It's just that they need to do a lot more of that, so that we really get a sense of what we're looking at. So yeah, the data is all there if you can parse it. If you can pull it out of a CSV, and there's ways to parse that data into something that's more usable. But you can really tell, because there's certain things that we want to, when I'm looking at a live event, there's certain things that I'm looking at critically. And so it's not just how many people showed up, it's when did they enter. So one thing we almost never see, we build these for our own systems, but we don't see public systems use this, is enter velocity and exit velocity. So when you look at participants down below here, or if you look at participants, or you look at viewers right now, concurrent viewers, which is something you see in YouTube or Facebook, that's an equilibrium of people leaving the room and entering the room at the same time. And so it's not how many viewers, it's how many, some are leaving. And what you want to know is, like, for instance, you want to see the exit velocity in real, preferably in real time, but definitely later. When did people leave? And a lot of times you can go back into that event and go, oh, that's when we said that. They were like, okay, I'm leaving. Or what really starts to get brutal is when you start doing that data, when you start doing exit velocity, the exit velocity on slides is stunning. And then if you start paying attention to it, tension and everything else. And so that's the thing that you want to see, but that a lot of times that gets masked by people coming in, so you don't really get the clear vision of it when you just look at concurrent views. But average view time is super important. Next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas in Texas. There are some new Zoom features coming out this week. Presentation slide control, optional reclaim host when rejoining, and full availability of live transcription, even for free accounts. Any thoughts on these new features?
They look great. I really am looking forward to the optional host claim, because right now hosting is claimed all the time every time I come back into after hours. So I think that's going to be really good. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm still waiting for the breakout rooms in webinars. Didn't they promise that like a year ago?
It turns out maybe it's hard.
It's a lot harder than they thought. You wonder when somebody makes a claim like that and then it takes forever. It's like,
I believe that's what they're calling Zoom events.
I think that it's funny because webinars probably lean more towards wanting to have breakout rooms than meetings. So it's an interesting thing that they don't have it. I find the whole webinars versus meetings thing kind of interesting, because it's like the teams forked and then they just went off into their own little worlds, and webinars created a bunch of cool stuff that wasn't available on meetings, and meetings created a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't. It was like, it feels like there were just two teams that were just kind of coming up with stuff. And the last time I saw something so dramatic in that was related to G3 and G4 chips on, in Motorola. They split, the team split, and then they just went off and, the two of them just did whatever they did. And, it almost ruined Apple, because the G3, suddenly they said, hey, let's put a big L2 cache on the back of the G3. And suddenly the G3 was faster than the G4, like it was, and Apple was basically giving those G3s away to Motorola and other folks. I mean, they're just, they were letting everybody else sell those. Remember when we had the non-Apple Macs? And so they almost got themselves flipped over that. So anyway, forked teams can be.
But it's interesting that they announced it, and just crickets from that announcement.
It's a hard, I think that what happens is you start what I find with development like that gets really delayed is that when you peel something open, you realize this is the way we should be doing. Like, you think, oh, I'm just going to do the thing we were doing over here. But as soon as you peel it open, I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on at Zoom about this. But my guess is that they peeled open, this is what we're going to do. And as they started to have meetings about it and figure it out, I think that they figured out there's a better way to do this, but it's going to be a lot harder, and it's going to require more in-depth development than what we thought. We're not just going to, and I think that the result that we get whenever it comes out will be better than all of breakout rooms is kind of a kludge, right? It's just a bunch of meetings encased into another meeting, and so it needs, that whole infrastructure needs to be, I think that whole infrastructure needs to be torn apart and put back together in a way that actually works. Right now we're in kind of this weird cobbled together Frankenstein. We put it on because it made sense in a moment, and now it's, now everybody's using it. It's a much more complicated thing. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think what's happening is that because it is a separate meeting, that time that it takes to bring somebody from one virtual stage meeting to the next, it's too long. Whereas if you look at StreamYard or if you look at Restream.io, the way that they send somebody backstage, it's instant. So like you pop somebody on and it's so seamless. So they'll probably come out with something else. But right now, I think that that's what happened because November was supposed to be the date of last year was supposed to be the date that we got webinar breakout.
Yeah, so I think it's just a rethinking of that process. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker from Southend-on-Sea in the UK. I've started playing with ZoomOSC in Bitfocus Companion, but can't get user status feedback to work, e.g. to show my mute status. Does this not work in the free version?
Go ahead, Andy.
So for any integration with ZoomOSC, the rule of thumb is if you're sending a command in the forward direction, sending commands to ZoomOSC, the free ZoomOSC will be fine. And all of the commands that are listed there as free, you'll be able just to push in. If you have anything going upstream, this would be user status feedback or button states or things like that are going upstream from ZoomOSC into your integration like Companion, that's where you need the list output from ZoomOSC Pro, which is the paid version. So in this case, in order to be able to actually create the user objects that are then styled by the mute status, you need the list command to come up to Companion. So you need ZoomOSC Pro for that. A quick tip among friends, looking left, right, don't tell anybody. If you email our support and you say you're building a Companion module or you're building out your Stream Deck profile and you want a couple of weeks of the Pro version for free, we'll give it to you. Just send us an email at info@liminalET.com. We'll take care of you.
It's pretty great to have a session where you have the developer and you ask questions. You actually, that's about as direct an answer as you can get. It's great. Next question.
Mitch Hill from Wilmington. For corporate work, are you noticing more clients submitting Zoom or team source videos for inclusion in projects? Also, what resolution do you end up with?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, which one is more? There's certainly a mix out there. At the enterprise level, there's probably more people that are locked into Teams than they are Zoom, but there's still a mix. I think that the challenge really is, though, the amount of variables that are involved. Even with Zoom, did they do a local recording? Did they do a cloud recording? Did they screen scrape? What kind of account do they have? So right up there, you probably do see a little more Teams, but across the board, you have all these variations, which just makes it a challenge.
I have to say I barely ever see Teams ever. Like it's just, it's like, outside of certain companies that we work with that definitely use Teams, I just don't see it in the wild that often. I see Blue Jeans a little bit. It crashes like once a week for me, and it just opens up and closes. And I have to kind of restart it a couple of times to get it to go. But what I see, obviously, almost every meeting that I'm in is Zoom, and it's across many companies. It's really an interesting puzzle. And then I see WebEx every once in a while. And it's gotten better. I will say, to be fair to WebEx, their video looks pretty good. All the debris all over the screen is really annoying, but it's not too bad. You were going to say, Chris?
Yeah, I will say that although I very much prefer Zoom, especially for all of the, things that we've learned here and the stuff that Andy's doing, Teams isn't horrible. It's not bad.
It's not, I didn't say that it was bad. I just said I don't see it very often. I actually think the video quality is pretty good.
And I can't get an isolated feed, and I can't get it to just fill a screen. There's still, and that's a problem. And I know that Sky deals with people up in Seattle that get clean feeds out of it. And it's not that there's any graphics on it. That's the one thing that's really nice. It's really easy to get rid of all the graphics.
Right.
But it's not horrible.
No, I think it's good. I think for whatever reason, like for instance, I know that if someone builds an event around Teams, I won't join because the login stuff all the passwords get so tied up because I have a Microsoft account, with my email. So if I see anything that looks like I have to join a Microsoft event, I just pull out immediately because as soon as I log in, it's going to screw up a whole bunch of other logins everywhere. So so Microsoft's way of managing that login system is part of why I think that I don't use it, is that I won't go to any event that's based on Teams because of the way the logins work. Because like Skype for me is just, I just re-register every time I use Skype. Like I have to get a new password. Like it just, and here's the funny thing is because LastPass doesn't work inside of the Skype brings up that modal window, and LastPass can't get into it. And so, and all I use is hashes. And so it's just like this nightmare of passwords for me. And so, so as a result, I don't use it. And I don't know if I'm the only one, but I find that that's an interesting behavior for me anyway, that I won't, like a CES last year was Teams or something like that. And I was like, well, I can't go with that, you know, so it's an interesting problem on their end. Next question.
John M. Gerald from Berkeley. What do you think of the DJI Pro Cinema camera with Libra autofocus, gimbal stabilizing, Apple ProRes recording, 8K at 60 and 4K at 120 recording?
Go ahead, Stuart. Are you there, Stuart?
I think it's a rather interesting design. I've seen similar designs in the past, and we will just bring it up so people can see it.
Similar designs in the past?
Done with GoPros and gimbals sitting on a box. Real absolute kludges. This is very much
integrated is not
solution.
Similar. Like I've seen things cobbled together that, you know, I've cobbled a car. I saw a car get put together.
Yeah. Okay. We can argue, but it kind of looks like they've taken the body of the Venice with the detachable sensor plate and put a gimbal between it. The design, it's interesting. The ergonomics are going to be something to get used to. I think realistically, we're going to need to wait until we see footage out of it, proper samples of what its color science is like. But being that it's DJI, they'll have a pretty damn good head start already.
Clean show. Because
of their history. The gimbal side of the thing will be absolutely perfect. It will work every time because DJI, but the color science is where it's going to be interesting to watch.
Go ahead, Sky.
I think it's what problem are they trying to solve? And just because you can doesn't always mean you should. There will be a lot of uses of this tool that possibly may not have needed this tool, but I think it's always pretty exciting, and because it's DJI, they've got a lot of experience in doing a lot of different new innovative things. So it will find its own place, and the price point will be affordable versus as you say, the cobbled together customized piece of equipment that like Industrial Light and Magic might have put together.
Yeah, Charles.
Yeah, I second everything that Stuart and Sky just said. From my point of view, I am more concerned about the color science. Now, we have found some ways to bring that DJI into a log C to work in, and it does a pretty good job. I know they needed to do a 8K 60 and a 4K 120, more like a marketing thing, because that's what people recognize. But they will run into the same issue that a lot of the companies using the same sensor doing 8K, which is going to be a bit more noise, right? So depending on what you are creating, it's going to give you some problems. Now, that being said, for what it does for a small crew on a budget, it's pretty phenomenal. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing people, in real world solutions, that are trying to figure out what's best. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. I'm getting a call.
No worries. Andrew Mazeppa sent me the link to the Corridor Digital review of it, which is pretty impressive. Like, if you really should look at the Corridor Digital video that they did on YouTube. It shows you it walks through it. They're obviously a little one-sided about it. They're pretty excited about it. I have to say that, DJI has had time. The key is that DJI has had time to think about all these things. So what we're not seeing is them creating a bunch of new things. We're seeing them take all the things that they've been creating and put them into one thing. And that's why I think it's going to do really well, is that they have been building their own sensors for quite some time. These color science is actually pretty solid from the Zenmuse 5 and 7. They already have the chip process figured out. Obviously the gimbals they have figured out, that's what they do. They have the distance tracking because of their drones. They have a bunch of that figured out as well. Wireless transmission is something that they know they've had to be shooting for miles, way more than most wireless transmissions. So all of the things that they're putting into it, all the remote control of the camera and all the bits and pieces, they're just taking all the technologies that were spread out across their company and pulling them into one camera system. And I think that it's pretty disruptive. You know, I mean, there's just so many places where we would definitely do a handheld if we could do a handheld. So, like if we, like we, if we can do a Steadicam, and again, this doesn't replace. There's a lot of things I can already, when I watch it, I go, well, this isn't really placing a Steadicam operator, because they do my brother, again, as I've always said, is a Steadicam operator, and he does things with his Steadicam that I don't know how that would do it. But we hire Steadicams all the time to do things that this would do easily. So I don't think it replaces Steadicam operators at the high end. I do think it replaces the kind of the day-to-day, I just need a soft walkthrough. I think it's not just going to impact filmmakers. It's going to impact people wanting to do walkthroughs of their homes. For real estate, it's going to affect, education. It's going to affect all kinds of other bits and pieces. And at the price point, it's pretty amazing. I do think that the grain, as Charles was pointing out, will be a little bit better. The graininess will be a little bit better because it's full frame sensor, and we're not trying to pack 8K into a Super 35. So I'm cautiously excited, but I've been able to talk to a couple people who played with it, and every person that's touched it is a pretty big fan. So it's like, this is what I'm going to shoot this and this with. So it's a pretty disruptive piece of hardware. Next question.
From Jason CP in Marietta in California, I received a $20,000 educational grant to get 4 cameras for high school students. All the money must be spent on kitting out the entire rig, body, lens, mics, peripherals, etc. Any panel recommendations? P.S. You'll be seeing me more again very soon.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, we bought this kit kind of recently, so I can tell you what we bought. But I really need to know: do the kids need to hand hold? Do they need to put it on their shoulder? Because what I'm going to kit out is going to be a tripod-based system, which is good for safety reasons for equipment for students. And try to always buy one extra system when you're thinking of students. But basically, it's a Pocket 6K. If you in this budget, if you have shorter students, you may want to go with the Pocket 6K Pro, because being able to tilt that viewfinder down is very advantageous for shorter students. And then below that, put a Mount Frotto 502 head and tripod. Put a power, what is it called? A Core SWX power base is really helpful. It's a nice long battery that will run that thing pretty much through about half your day, so you might need 2 per camera. I would go for what you can afford here, because again, you're trying to hit a budget point of 5,000. Either the Sigma 18 to 35 or a Canon 24 to 70 on the front end of it, what you can afford, and then the Samsung T5s. Whatever, again, you can size 1 terabyte will probably be fine for most classes. 2 terabytes is really nice. It's a luxury. And then go to location. I know you're down here in California, so I'd send you over to Location Sound just to kind of see what they have for microphones and boom poles. Don't spend a lot on the boom pole, but definitely put as much money as you can into the microphone. So everything's kind of a little bit of a push and a shove to see what you can put together into that kit. I'll stop there.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Continuing from that, we need to know if this is going to be in studio cameras, if this is going to be out students doing some sort of roving reporting. We also need to know if this is going to be reporting type situation, or if this is going to be more on the cinema side of things. Because then the $5,000 you can get a lot. Like, for instance, I have the Sony AX700 with the Sony dual lav system, which is great for going out and getting one-on-one interviews. But if you're doing it in studio, you might want to think about having at least one of those cameras be like a PTZ camera, so it's easier to control for the daily news or anything like that.
Go ahead, Charles.
So recalling my days in school, usually you'll have a small team of students trying to gather around one of the cameras that you get to rent. So my recommendation would be, let's say, start with a Pocket 6K. It's around $2,000. The Sigma 18 to 35 is a really nice lens. It gives you some options there. I would really like to see the video assist or just a larger monitor, so that when you do have 3 or 4 or 5 kids on the same rig, you can have some of the data from the camera on the back of the camera and some on the side, let's say like the scopes or false color, sometimes that's how they get to learn about that. There's a lot of variables here that we don't know about, like everybody has mentioned. Is this going to be handheld in studio, outside in the woods? I would start with that base, and then depending on the sound quality, that's where it's not my expertise, so I'll leave that to the rest of the panel.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so I mean, for a nice little project like that with the budget, I would recommend at least trying to go with one vendor. They may be able to put you together a nice quote, bill of materials, and maybe able to even out some of the pricing, give and take here and there. And then you've got one, point of contact and one invoice to pay, and they may give you a bit of pre-sales consulting also.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we do a few of these, and what I've seen is I like to spend more on the audio just because the stuff lasts longer. It'll stand the test of time, and the tripod. So I know everybody wants the 6K, but within that $5,000 budget, you have to go with the bigger EF glass, like the 18 to 35, whereas a 24 to 70 would cost a bunch. But in the 4K land with the Micro Four Thirds, you can get the Lumix 12 to 35 or the Olympus 12 to 40, and that lens is like $800 instead of $2,000. So I would recommend that, and then dumping more into a MixPre 6, or if you can find it, we got a couple MixPre 3 still. That way you're getting better audio, because remember, audio is half your project. So, and then lights, if you can get some lights in there, because dumping all the money just on the camera and the glass is only going to get you so far. Audio, tripod, lights.
Yeah, one thing that I'd probably do, I'd probably lean towards the 6K myself. I have the 4K. I have a 4K, and I find that the light sensitivity and the depth of field is something that's problematic on my end. So that's the only thing that I would say about that. And the students are actually pretty savvy because they watch a lot of YouTube. I'm surprised at how quickly my kids cue on what they're looking at based on the depth of field. It's really a funny thing. Anyway, so the one thing that I would think about is not getting the same lens for all of the cameras. So I would think about breaking that up. So you have a 16 to 35, a 24 to 70, because then what you're doing is you're mixing and matching. You might have two 24 to 70s, but I would look at a wider and a longer as the fourth lenses, or possibly get one extra lens or something like that. But having those lenses around in the kit, when we did it in Africa, we definitely got a core number of lenses. At this time back then, we were doing 5Ds. And we got a core number of lenses, but we definitely got the full complement of lenses. And it's really saved us in a lot of shows to be able to have a long lens or a wide lens that is beyond the kind of the 24 to 70, which I think is, and I think the Sigma 24 to 70 is also pretty reasonable. It's half the price of the Canon. So anyway, those are some things to think about there. And then a shoulder mount, probably, to do that. I wouldn't probably spend the money on the I understand the argument, but I probably wouldn't spend it on the maybe one camera that's the Pro that can move the screen, but I wouldn't put an extra $500 into all four cameras to do that. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, it's a good point. We did buy 3 24 to 70 lenses, Canon EFs, and then we bought 1 70 to 200, because just for the exact reason, a lot of times you're sitting in the back of the room. The 24 to 70 will fit the whole stage, but we got some really nice shots with that 70 to 200. So having that, especially in an educational setting, you will be called on if you have really nice equipment to do some back of the room type productions.
Yeah. The big thing is that I think that whether you do the 4K or the 6K, the Blackmagic platform is really good across all. If you're running and gunning, that's what I take out. That's my takeout camera. It's nice and compact, and I can put it somewhere, and I can shoot incredible footage anywhere in the world. And I have shot footage all over the world with that camera, with the 6K. But also once you go into a studio environment, you now have control from the switcher, in all the shading controls that you would want to have in a live environment. I find that to be very, very difficult to compete with when you're looking at cameras for students. And they're just going to learn a lot about a lot of things, like would not buy a camera that I can't load a LUT into, and would not buy a camera that doesn't record RAW. The students may not use that all the time, but they have to have that opening that they could record RAW and understand how to color correct, and that they can learn how LUTs work, because LUTs are their future. If they're anywhere interested in film, LUTs are their future, and they need to understand how they work. Next question.
From Tony Mobley in Newnham in Georgia. How do I get more engagement outside of office hours for conversations with Tony Mobley?
Go ahead, Chris.
What I would do is I would do what all the YouTubers do. And what you need to do is you need to collaborate. You need to reach out to other shows that are similar. And I know that your show is unique, Tony. But you need to invite them on, you need to invite them on as guests. You will have a great conversation with them, but their audience is going to trickle and follow. Not all of them, of course, but some. And then the other thing that I did when I was podcasting is I would actively engage people on social media. My preference is Twitter. And I understand it's not a real place, but Twitter.
I thought it was the Twitters.
There's a Dave Chappelle line. He goes, I know it's not a real place. But by engaging with people using their hashtag, I mean, if I mention something on Twitter and I mention Alex, all of his audience sees that. And it's a scam that people do all the time. So you're welcome to do it as well. But cross-pollinating between different shows is probably the best way.
Jeffrey?
Two ways to do this. First of all, I'll get the promotion part out of the way. You can actually, buy ads on Facebook, buy ads on YouTube, promote your stuff that way, and that'll get a lot of coverage, but it'll be quick and easy coverage, and you might not get anything out of it. The second way, as Chris said, is getting boots on the ground and going to these places. Reddit seems to be a great place if you've got specific places that you want to go to. Since Tony, you have your cover. Your shows can go from Alex to one week to Lamar another week, and you're pretty much jumping from area to area, which is great, and you can do. You want to at least get into areas that the next week's guests is going to usually frequent, and then kind of not promote yourself, but be a part of the community so they can understand who you are and understand what the show is going to be about. Then let them ask the questions, like what's your show about, and then that'll bring more engagement. But I find that Reddit is, if you understand Reddit, that's going to be a big powerhouse to promote your show for.
Go ahead, Charles.
So during the pandemic, I actually helped a couple of friends start to build their online presence. And the one thing that has been the strongest help is building out content as much as you can, because if you start to reach out to people and you only have, let's say, like 1 or 2 videos, they might get disappointed and not come back. But if you get that engagement and you have a plethora of options and a lot of things and different kinds of guests and hosts and topics, then they can get engaged and then they can stay. But if you get them to come and see you and there's not much there to see, they might never come back again. So you have to take that into account. Then once you start to do that, and it's a long road, it's going to take some time. You're going to have to be putting out content constantly, right? And just do you. Have great conversations, be yourself, get comfortable with just being you so that everybody knows what they're getting. And then you can find your family that will find you. But first create a volume of content and start to put that out and then go from there.
Go ahead, Tony.
So I realized that it is a little bit all over the place, but the consistent thing that I try to do is to have real conversation with interesting people. That's my tagline. And that's really what I'm promoting. The office hours community for my shows is a different animal in that what I want is for people outside of the community to get to know these very special people that are in office hours. But when the show is about an interesting person that's outside of the community, then it's a little bit different, because I really want you to have an idea of who this person is and what is the interesting thing that they're doing. So it's kind of 2 shows in one. But any encouragement or ideas, I'd appreciate.
You go, Sky.
This is a big question, because it gets back to me. It's if you know the why, these how questions that you're asking, those are almost kind of simple. And these different how questions are what people are responding with, this technique and that. And I guess I will kind of push back in saying that, yes, Twitter, Facebook, these locations are real. When a group of people would come from a different part of the world and visit my family, and my children immediately have a creative interaction with each other. They're using the same language, they're using the same experience because they were all on some kind of a social media gathering place. So these locations are real. They are changing hearts and minds.
Yeah. So, I mean, the one thing I will say is that we have to keep on looking at social media. And when you look at those things, just remember that most of those folks that are really popular cranked through sometimes hundreds of videos before they were popular. And so the thing is when you do the first 8, this is when we say, how did someone get so big on Twitter? They did it all the time, and they didn't get a lot of views all the time. They threw a lot of stuff up on the wall, and they figured out what their audience was interested in and what it wasn't interested in. And they put up stuff that doesn't get, like when I tweet out, my goal, every tweet that I put out, I mean, I put out some that I'm just frustrated. I put something up, or I'm just thinking something's funny and I put it up. But most of the time, once a day, you'll see me put up a post that I intend to get 100 likes. like that is a thought that I've thought about. I have a list of them as they pop into my head in my thing, and I put something in that is some kind of observation or whatever. And if it doesn't, I measure it in my head, like, oh, that didn't hit the mark for the folks that were that follow me on Twitter, or wow, that really did hit the mark. And so I take that in, I measure that. It doesn't change too much of the flavor of what I do, but it does I definitely think through that process all the time, of what that looks like. And so you want to be paying attention to those things, but at 10 episodes, you have no idea. Like you don't have enough sample rate. I mean, we're just figuring out what we're doing here, and we've done 570 some, of these. And so you like most of us that worked in radio, we worked, you didn't get a job in a, top radio station in Pittsburgh or LA or New York or whatever. The first time you went out, and that was good because we're still figuring it out. So you'd work in some little station that you can barely hear outside of the station, or you do the overnight shifts, you do the weekend shifts, you do all those other shifts because you are figuring it out. And so you don't want to be too impatient about that because your show is just barely getting its legs. You have a remote system that's just starting to work. You're starting to get into your groove. And what I would say is that I would focus mostly on our community as far as who to interview. For now, because I think that what you want to do is have people who understand when it technically didn't work today, but we can back up and do it again tomorrow. It's okay. I would be careful about, I think that you did have a great one last week, but I think that you want to be careful of doing that right now because you still have to get into your groove, and the tech system behind it still needs to get into its groove. So I wouldn't be what kills most people's startup in social media is stopping immediately because it takes so long to drum that up. Charlie DeMello did not start with 1 million followers. There's hundreds of videos of her in Musical.ly, or when she was in Musical.ly, that she was getting 10 and 20 and 50. It slowly picked up. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I second everything that Alex just said. This concept of having interesting conversations with interesting people has evolved and grown. But if you look at some of the top people like Joe Rogan, if you look at his first 100 videos, he did it with his close friends, and they talked about stuff that they found interesting. And then a viewer can see the passion they had for that particular thing, right? And that slowly built. But he didn't do it to get followers. He didn't do it to get the money. They just did it because they enjoyed it. And you have to make sure that you have that same passion and interest with, I think that you do, because that's what's going to get you through the hard times, which will inevitably come. So you have to understand that process.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
And then the last thing I think that I would say is you're going to do it for at least a year. You need to be really dedicated to it for a year with a consistent delivery time, every Wednesday at 8 a.m. or whatever it is that you do it. You need to commit to at least that much time, and that'll get you well on the way to that first 100 shows that Charles mentioned.
And suddenly sparking, I mean, we've been very careful not to push it too hard here, because a sudden spark means that you have a whole different community that has a whole bunch of different opinions, and you're building fast but very porously. A lot of porous connection, and so I would just say just keep doing it. You're doing a great job, and it's really coming together. So I would just keep doing it, and then just let the world find it. It'll happen. I definitely believe it will.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Steve Erickson from Hamilton in Massachusetts. Any recommendations for a cooling fan base for a laptop? I have 3 monitors connected while doing intensive work and want to further cool down the overall temperature. Looking for genuine recommendations. Please no suggestions, just to buy an M1 instead.
Go ahead, Rupert.
So for laptop cooling, what I prefer to do is get the laptop off the desk completely and onto one of these standalone stands. This is passive cooling. These don't have fans, but it gets it way out there in open air. There's a big metal slab there, so it's not in direct contact with the body of the laptop, but it will help just to dissipate some of that cooling. I tend to keep the laptop open again to help with cooling. And if you have a bunch of I/O on your laptop, try and use that before you start spilling over to your docking station to just make sure you're not putting too much strain on that that bus, or asking the laptop to do too much work that it could do through some of its onboard ports.
Good. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so on set, that's exactly what we've done in the past. Okay, you don't want a surface to compound the heat between the surface of the laptop and the table or whatever, so we get it off of that. That's like 12 inches. But another thing that we've done, once we do that, we'll just blow a fan, top and bottom. If it doesn't have to be sound requirements or everything like that, it's just crunching through something, we'll blow top and bottom. And we've seen from 15 to 20% improvements in rendering times when we're on set and trying to get something done. So consider that.
I do think that that's one of the things that people misunderstand when they talk about power allocation and heat allocation, is how much it affects performance. So you can have a computer that tests really fast when you first turn it on, but let it run for a little while and get hot, and then test it again, and you find the performance profile changes dramatically. Next question.
Also from Steve Erickson in Hamilton and Massachusetts. Does anyone have experiences with the Logitech Mevo Start NDI cameras? Looks like a flexible and affordable solution for adding a few extra wired or wireless NDI cameras to a setup.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Firstly, just looking through and talking about shopping, the price for 1 versus the price for 3, buy 3, because it's basically the third one you're getting for 1/3 of the price. Secondly, it's not NDI, it's NDI HX, which is what you're using if it's Wi-Fi. So look at the PoE USB adapter, which is $149 by itself, because you will need wired. They claim 100, well, hang on, I'll just double check, make sure I get it right. 300 feet, I think it was. No, 100 feet, which is 30 meters. I very much doubt you will get a decent Wi-Fi NDI HX connection over that, when not even NewTek's own hardware will do that. So yeah, but pricing wise, buy 3, not 1.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Here's the camera right here. I am using it, and this is the video that I'm shooting with right now. That's coming straight from the NDI through the Mevo Start. Of course, with this, you can also control it with the app. And here's the app right here. It is 1080p. Keep that in mind. It's not 4K. So when you shrink it down to that smaller angle, that it will bring down your quality down to 720. But if you're doing small overhead shots, I've used this for bands. This is the full 1080 shot, by the way. So if you're using it for bands, if you're using it for anything like that, it's a great idea. It's also got the ability to plug in a microphone on the back, and you can get some audio for like a bar gig or something like that. Great extra camera for when you need something remote, and I've used this many times in that situation.
Next question.
James from Dublin in the Isle of Ireland. I see Andy has a spiffy new background. Can you talk about it, and can the lights be remotely controlled?
Andy?
Hey, everybody. So, yes, I invested in some Nanoleaf canvas panels, 75 of them in my background. Yeah, it was an investment in the background. I kind of viewed this shot. I was redoing my office as sort of my, like the 3-piece suit, like we say, of business and all of that. So I wanted to invest in that. I thought it was worth it. The way I control this, there's an app the Nanoleaf app that actually can manage this. But I also wrote an app for this. It's in the Office Hours open source repo. Yeah, LeafOSC. So it's basically just you want to hit this from OSC.
And I found it lacking.
Yeah, I was dissatisfied as a customer. No, basically I took their API and I ported it to OSC because that's like I'm a one-trick pony and that's the only thing I do. So the purpose of the OSC app is so that I can control it from Isadora or things like that. So I could, for example, ingest video into Isadora, take the most common color, and then set it to the background or things like that. The other advantage of doing it this way is that I could then hand off control to third parties through VPNs or Streamweaver or things like that. It also can be DMX controlled, which if we wanted to set up an ArtNet universe and start going through all of that, we could do that as well. So a lot of options there. It's really for fun. There's a whole bunch of different profiles that I have. And it's honestly, the biggest change for me has been not necessarily when I'm on a Zoom call, but also when I'm in the space. There's no lighting in this room. There's no bulbs in the ceiling or anything like that. I have my studio lights. They're kind of harsh. So having this wide area of light has helped me sort of set the mood of the room. I can have a sort of a more blue light when I'm looking for more of a focus, more of an orangey kind of hue with amber if I'm looking for something more relaxing. It's helped with my eye strain a lot. So I think it was worth it. I'm very happy with it.
It feels like you've broken through the wall and there's the light is coming through right now. It's great. I really like it. Next question. Go ahead. Next question. I was about to read it.
Rupert Murray in Dallas in Texas. Can the panel recommend ways or tools to edit VTT transcript files other than just editing in plain text? Anything more slick? Other tips and tricks? Welcome.
What are you trying to edit? Are you trying to edit something that's going back to video?
Yeah, so the use case was in the files that Zoom generates. So you do a cloud recording. It will, if you're either using the inbuilt transcription or even if you're using an external service, but then Zoom stores that VTT file in the recording. But then if you want to tidy it up a little bit, you want to download it, bring it into an editor, make any corrections, and then either re-upload it or embed it into an onward delivery.
Yeah, the big thing is whether you want to edit the VTT itself. I mean, so you may want to convert it. And there's a couple different. I'm just looking. I just downloaded one that actually worked great, and now I can't remember what it's called. Somewhere in my computer, but it is so you can. There is a conversion tool that you can get that will convert VTT to SRT to all those other things. Now I believe that Zoom does VTT. Is that correct? Is that what it exports? Correct. I haven't had to do it.
Yep.
So I don't know if you can import VTT into software editing apps. Sometimes you need an intermediary to do the conversion. Now there's a bunch of Mac caption tools. There's Mac captions and there's another caption tool that I can't think of the name of it, but it's on the PC. That's both made by Telestream. So Telestream makes a really hard, heavy duty, and there's a light version that's I think not that expensive.
Switch is the name of that.
No, Switch is the QuickTime video, but there's a captioning specific tool that Telestream makes that will let you go in and edit everything. And they have a light version that's I think a couple $100. They have a heavy version. I have the heavy version of the Mac version, which is like $6,000. So, but it will convert everything to everything, reformat your stuff, re-roll it. There's all the things that you'd want to do to really, if you're really getting into caption editing, you need a tool that heavy, but they do make a lighter version that you can use that's pretty effective on the PC. I wouldn't buy the Mac one at this point, but the PC one is fairly effective. And again, there's another app that I just is escaping me at the moment that I use to do raw conversions of VTT to VTT from SRT, et cetera. The way that I really like to edit my captions is actually in Final Cut. So when you take an SRT and you import it into Final Cut, it just comes in over your video. And it allows me to visually see what they were saying. And it's actually all timed the way it should be in there. And so I can see what they're saying. I can move things around. I can change the formatting a little bit if I want to. So there's a lot of control. Final Cut went from 0 to 100 in like one update a couple years ago. And they've really made that feature a lot more effective. Premiere also has good captioning tools or a variety. Premiere will actually do transcription on its own to the videos. And so there's a lot of tools there as well. Next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas in Texas. The new Zoom Community Support Forum is up for the Best New Community Industry Award. What other vendors have you known to have great support communities, internal rather than external, new or otherwise?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was going to say the new community is kind of the thing. Sometimes there's a lot of passion around a new product, and so you get people that come out of the woodwork that are just fascinating to listen to. Red, had a great community, and to this day, I would say ask David Mullen, who's a ASC cinematographer, gives wonderful tips and tricks in there. So that's not specific to their product, but it has an evergreen purchase to it, and that's the hard part, is to keep that community going for a long period of time. That's what's unique about office hours, is the fact that we come from diverse backgrounds, and so far we like each other.
Yeah. Well, people who don't get along just don't stay. So it's a widowing kind of thing. So, or winnowing process. I do think that companies need to really take community seriously. I think that really they need to be thinking about, I think we talk about content marketing, we talk about marketing, and they really need to think about community marketing, which is they're going to build a community around their brand. And to Roscoe's point, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. It takes kind of a constant effort to do that. But we just see over and over and over again the pushback on advertising, the pushback on tracking, the pushback on all of those things. The house is on fire. They just can't see it yet. They can smell the smoke somewhere. I don't know if advertising is going to work. I don't know if tracking everybody is going to actually work down the road. They can smell it, but they can't see the fire and they don't feel the heat yet, but it's coming. People are starting to get really grossed out. I think part of this is all the GDPR process, where people are getting really clear. Like every time you open up a website, it has all this. Is it okay if we do this? You're like, ew, you were doing that before? That's gross. So that's, I think that's having a negative effect, and people being able to opt out of it. So I think we're going to see a lot more communities, where we should, because if they don't, they're going to be trying to figure out how to get hold of their audience pretty quickly. Next question.
Rupert Murray is back again from Dallas in Texas. Annual versus monthly subscriptions. Some vendors only offer annual pricing. Some others entice you with discounts for annual payment. Some are monthly. Some with an annual commitment. Which do you actually find more convenient or otherwise?
Go, Jeffrey.
I love annually. Annually, there's so many advantages to have it annually. In fact, my Zoom room is actually going to be renewing tomorrow. So I got an email like a week before, so I could make the decision if I was going to do that. Of course, not all products are going to do that, but it was nice to have that. The other thing about having an annual subscription is yearly annual subscription for that matter, is if 6 months from now Zoom decided to up the price on that, I'm not going to get affected until this time next year. And then maybe since I've had this room for a while, sometimes they'll go, hey, you've been with us for a while, so we're not going to give you that new rate until 2023, or as long as you keep paying for that. So I find that there's a lot of savings that happen on the yearly annual, and I really get upset when companies they only offer a monthly or something like that. Just it's annoying.
Go ahead, Leo.
I personally also agree with Jeffrey that I prefer yearly. Yearly is coming up for anybody who uses Restream. You know that they always have their Halloween sale, and you can normally get the best deal from Restream ever. Is the one that they do anytime now. But from a company perspective, the monthly is the best. They love it. You lock people in, and you know it's coming out on a monthly basis, and you even your cash flow, and you also are able to increase that by ever so slightly a small amount of $1 to $3 a month. Nobody ever notices it, and you go up and up. That's how all of these guys work, and the people behind them in the money side will always want monthlies.
Go ahead, Stuart.
The reasons Leo just cited is the reasons I would say neither, never. Companies don't want you buying a product outright. They want you renting the product so they can offer it to us as a service, both for that income stream and because under the law, a service has different warranty responsibilities compared to a product. And they can get away with a lot more without actually providing you a decent product. So, yeah, so my answer is none. never.
Go ahead, Charles.
I personally do prefer the annual just from a B2B point of view. If it's something that's going to be used in production and making me money, I just rather get it over with. So now, it is funny, most of the companies that do have a monthly are the companies that have had an IPO, let's say like Adobe. So from a stock point of view, those companies have actually profited from that side. But companies that are still private, they tend to do more of the annual where they just know that's going to be there.
And go ahead, Sky, real quick.
I think, yes, I think this comes from the gym membership concept where you would buy the gym annual concept and then maybe not go to the gym. So I would love the old days of when you bought something and you owned it, but now we're in community with these different systems that hopefully are helping our product get better.
I actually like the monthly when I'm not sure if I'm going to use the product. You know, like I turn it on, I use it, and then I just turn it off. And now I have to admit that I tend to cancel, especially my big thing about one of my big pushes for wanting to buy things through the app stores is because I have one place on my phone. This is why if you hear me on Mac Break, just rail, is because it's so easy for me to manage my subscriptions inside of the app store. I go in, I sign up for something, and then I turn it off right after I sign up. So I sign up, I wait. Sometimes it has an error if you do it right after it, but within an hour, I just turn it off. And then if I want to have it, if I want to have it again, it'll stop working, and I'll turn it back on again. But I just expire everything all the time because it's just easier for me to manage. If I use it for a couple months in a row, then I leave it on because I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this. But I really like the control that I have in one place to make that work. Next question.
Leo Mindell from Pinner in the UK. I would like to use NDI to send presenters' laptops to a projector and then also to the stream. Suggestions for hardware on the laptop end and the projector end.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, I'm going to put a link into the chat. It is the list of GPUs from NVIDIA that support the NVENC encoder and multiple streams on that. That's the hardware that you'll find in either the GTX GPU or the Quadro GPU, and I would recommend the Quadro because it does more streams. That'll convert to the MPEG-4 that the NDI is based on in hardware rather than loading up your CPU to do it. The next thing would be a decent amount of network bandwidth, so gigabit internet or gigabit Ethernet as a minimum.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm kind of reading this. You want to keep it in external hardware rather than hardware in the machine. But like the Magewell or the Bird Dog products will give you an encoder at one end, a decoder at the other end, providing you've got your networking piece taken care of. But at the laptop end, I'm kind of visioning this as being a walk-up situation where you'll have different presenters maybe hooking up. So for that situation, make sure you get you can choose to get a encoder with either a pass-through or put it through a splitter and then have a local monitor also. So if you're going for that dual display kind of setup, you've got something local to look at before you beam it up to your projector.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, hardware-wise, the NDI Spark going from the laptop into NDI, and then Magewell makes the Ethernet to HDMI that can go to the projector. But if you're just using a single laptop, then NDI Tools is the way to go. You can download that absolutely free and be able to send it to the projector. You'll still need the Magewell on the other end, though.
Go ahead, Kai.
Yeah, it just depends on what you want to do. I mean, I don't like installing any apps on presenters' computers. I prefer to go HDMI or DVI out into something else like a decimator and then go to SDI and then take it from there. So I do the decode there. I would not mess with somebody's laptop, especially if they're doing something with some processing on that laptop, like teaching Final Cut or something like that. So I've just been burned in the past putting a load on somebody else's stuff. But if it's something that I'm doing, then yeah, I just use the vMix desktop capture and flow out that way. I wouldn't use the NDI scan converter.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, it's the walk up, different people all the time presenting. It needs to be a hardware solution to replace what is a hardware solution at the moment, which is VGA over an Ethernet cable, which doesn't work.
All right, next question.
Next question is James in Dublin in Ireland. Zoom 1080p on a corporate account. When the 1080p bit is flipped, do all the accounts support 1080p?
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yes, with some caveats. Just to clarify the terminology, corporate account, the account levels with the Zoom are pro, business, and enterprise. So I'm assuming by corporate, you mean something in the business or enterprise space. That's where 1080p is typically available. So it's several stages. First, you do need to get that bit flipped by Zoom on the back end. That then enables you to enable it at your end at an admin level for the whole account. That setting should then flow down to all your user accounts. But even in those user profiles, they have a flip switch also for 1080p. So if for any reason that was off, that would need to be on at the user level. And then in their clients, in the Zoom client, they'll need to have HD enabled locally, and of course have a camera capable of displaying it. And it will only apply to meetings that your users host. They won't be able to join other meetings and bump those meetings.
Jeffrey.
Absolutely, and the only setback would be is if the computer can't handle the 1080p, if the camera is not 1080p, or the Ethernet or network is not going at an optimal bit rate, then you won't get 1080p. But other than that, you should be able to.
Next question. And Jeffrey, you're cutting your mic just a little fast. Anyway, go ahead. Next question. I could do that back end. Sorry. Go ahead,
James in Dublin and Ireland. 8 hours ago, Blackmagic released a video showing the new features of DaVinci Resolve. It claims the new release runs 5 times faster than the previous version on the new M1 Pro Max machines. Excited?
Go ahead, Charles.
Why, yes. Now, what's interesting is that when we first got the M1s, we ran it before the update for the M1 and Resolve. And in some of the projects we were getting, it's like 10 to 12 frames per second. We did the update for the M1 on the Mac Mini, and we started to get 32, 34 frames per second, which is a massive gain, right? We had some noise reduction and all that stuff. Now, we expected something similar for this because now you have more of the encodes and decodes. I mean, there's dual of everything on the Max chip. So yeah, I'm actually very excited because I maxed out my machine. So I'm looking forward to see what this thing does.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm excited just to see an ongoing development of a NLE that I'm currently using. The type of work I do is narrative, and we're not doing 8K or 4K at this point in time. So actually, it doesn't matter to me that it's 5 times faster because the hard drive speed is what matters the most to me.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Charles.
Sorry, one more thing. The native HDR in the GUI for a lot of people is going to be a huge thing. And I know that it's still it's like on Macs, it's still going to have the ICC color profiles, which is not exactly proper for good color grading. But for most people that are just content creators, GUI HDR on one machine, it's going to be massive.
Yeah, it's coming along really fast. I think it's the speed of development that we see inside of Resolve is pretty amazing. They just have they're pushing it really hard. In fact, just really going down the path very, very quickly. So it's funny. I still use a lot of Final Cut to do what I'm doing, but I also find myself bouncing in and out of Resolve almost every day. Just little, I got to do this, I got to do that. Now, this is the advantage of that whole platform, is that I'm shooting on that, and so I need to at least touch it to go through it, and then when I'm there, I'm like, oh, I can do all of this stuff here, and I can make this all work. And so it's a pretty interesting thing that they're doing there. And you are seeing the advantages for companies who are writing directly to the metal, literally. So that's the advantage. And I think that you're going to see a lot more companies do well going down that path. Next question.
And the last question for this hour is James in Dublin, Ireland. On the question section of Mukana, there are 2 buttons for popular and on deck. Would it be worth having first hour, second hour as well?
Yeah, I think the reason we don't add more of those is if you start subdividing how many places there are to go. Even now in the mobile version, I sometimes wonder whether we should, and this is kind of leading us into the second hour discussion anyway. I sometimes wonder whether it makes sense for us to have I think the popular questions, when you start adding more tabs, people see them less because they're in the chat all the time. And so there's a couple things that I'm pondering that, I had Chris working on a bunch of other things that for work over the last couple of weeks, but we're going to do a bunch of work over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Chris asked me for directives this morning. We were talking at like 4:00 in the morning this morning, and I said, well, the number one, there's two little features that I have to have added, and then I was like number 3 in the top 3 was just respond to whatever Andy needs. so it's like, we're about to go through a big push. So I just, whatever he asked for, just turn that back over, as quickly as possible, because we're going to go through kind of a growth turn, and we're going to probably need a couple adjustments. And so anyway, but I think that one of the things that I've been thinking about, and this is an open question for the show, is, and I guess this is again where I have to figure out we're going to figure this out too, which is when I have an open discussion with the panel, we're really good at, I realize we have a whole tool that's designed around the panelists answering questions. So we have all the infrastructure to do that. What I don't have is an open air, like, hey, we're going to have just a discussion among the panelists. I don't have any way to manage that conversation, which is an interesting problem to have. So anyway, we're going to work on that. But what I was going to say is that, one of the things I'm thinking about doing in the chat is having the popular or new questions just appear in the chat. Like, so when you ask a new question, it just pops into the chat. Like, this is a question. In fact, I was thinking that it's kind of like an In-N-Out burger. For those of you who know In-N-Out burger, it's kind of like a secret thing that if you just go //Q or something like that, and you can just type it in, you can just be in chat and ask the question that you want to ask, and it automatically is registered as a question. And then it also shows it in the view. So the two things that you see is when a question's being asked and when a question's being answered. The concern I have, and I don't know if people have opinions about it, the concern I have is that it becomes lots of interruptions. But we don't have that many questions that it would be that big of a deal. And if we had too many, then it could be something that's hard to figure out. Like, if people were asking a question every 10 seconds and you're trying to have a conversation, it wouldn't work. If people are having it at the velocity that we do it at, it probably would be fine. One of the things I've been also thinking is just making that an option. So you can, as a user, you can opt out of it. So it starts with it on. And if you really like to have those conversations, it doesn't. I don't know if people have an opinion about that, but that's something I've been pondering, is getting the questions actually more into the chat. So less folders, and keep the folders there. You can look at the new ones. On the desktop, it makes more sense because we display that for you. We display the chat. And the reason we have all those windows, people ask, like, why do you have all those windows? Is because people interact with them more when they're open. Like when they're open, when there's like a heads up display and they're watching it, they react more to the content that they're seeing moving, as opposed to, and it also feels a lot more like something, we've talked about this a little bit in broadcast. When there's a whole bunch of data coming, especially for talking head things like what we do here, when there's a lot of different data that is kind of floating around in front of you, it is something that you tend to be reading it. And so the experience isn't just watching us talk. It's also interacting with other people, interacting with the questions, asking other questions. There's potentially a lot of other things to do that are related to the show. We don't use polls we have the poll function. Obviously, people have seen it, but we don't use them as often as we probably will in the future. I mean, I think that's, as we talk about 2.0, I definitely think that polls will be a fun thing to do more often. Because I think that, getting people's pulse, like, how do you do this and how do you do that? And one of the things that I'm thinking about related to 2.0 is definitely having the ability to having a team that's just working on polls, like trying to think of polls that we do, aim for 3, 4, 5 times a show, that we're getting the audience's feedback. Do you use this, or how often do you use vMix? Do you use this, or how do you do this? And those types of things. The hard part is we don't know what we're going to get until 20 minutes before the show. So that's another bit and piece. If you want to, does anyone have any, I don't know if anyone in the panel has any opinions about what I just said, but I can look at the chat. But yeah, go ahead, Leo.
So I do on the chat, and particularly about the panel, when we go into things like this, which is a panel discussion, myself and Marty, in the shows that we're running, we're using Mukana on one of those shows, and we're having exactly this problem. And we're trying our hardest to stay within the boundary of what we've been given by Chris, rather than trying to sort of request changes. So we're just like, we're the end users, we have to live with what it has.
Well,
we do sit there.
The best part of being early on is you don't have to. so
we don't want to overburden with certain things, but there is this thing when we're trying to throw something around, which is a bit more that isn't a question that came in. It's almost we want to put in a dummy
Have a
question that
discussion.
we can then
Yep.
just go like that, and that's one thing. The other thing on related to it is we also want to feed in questions that we just you want to. It's all like seeding questions. So we want to seed in questions, and it's like, how do I put in a seeding question that doesn't just say Leo Mindell is asking Leo Mindell? It's like coming from an anonymous.
I mean, not to get too into the back end, but if you look in the middle, in the operator page, in the middle column, there's a manual question input. So anyway, just to let you know it's there. Just to handle the one thing that you need there. Go ahead, Tony.
So Wednesday night, I had an interesting thing where I was using Mukana, and I was putting in, or what was put in for me was my questions. And when my questions came in, I basically had them broken up into acts, like beginning of the life, middle of the life, what's going to happen in the future. And so that's the way I had my questions arranged in Mukana. But the thing that happened, and I hadn't even thought about it until we had done it, was when other people's questions came in, then those questions were voted up more so than some of mine. And some of mine that I had planned to ask at the end got voted up. And so is there a way to do that?
Yep. You either put them in the manually there, or you lock them. Instead of saying go to host, you hit a lock. And when you lock it, it goes into the middle column. Then it's just in there in the order that you created it. I don't want to make it too much about Mukana, but there's that tool there is for that. And the reason that locked, just to get into it really quickly, that locked column can be also, we don't have it in the current version that we have here, but can be listed to a producer, and then the producer can approve them and not approve them. So that what happens is that means moderators can be looking at raw data, passing cleaner data to the producers, who then approve or disapprove of it. In one version of our software, you can't put it into the host. Like, you can't hit the host button without the producer hitting OK. So there's no way to send. That's for higher. That's for projects that require more control. so anyway, so there's other tools in here but that middle column, the lock instead of host, is what you want there. We're working on educating people on how to use it. We just go straight to host, but the host, being able to go straight to host was something we added for office hours, because we were like, we don't need this other tool that we use all the time in other things. We just need to be able to push it over, because there's not that many people working on it. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions, and then we'll come back to just general discussion. First question.
First question is from Tolene Mobley in Newnham. What is going to be the low-end setup that will work for Office Hours 2.0 for those that are not here yet but coming?
I think that I would say probably something like a Brio plus a good mic, is really the thing that I'm way more interested in the mic than the camera. So I do think that at some point we'll have to keep tuning up the cameras and so on and so forth. But I think that a Brio is fine as far as the quality goes. I don't think anything below that really works. Phones will, like you've been using. The phones look better than the Brio. And so, everything I think from pretty much iPhone 8 and above is probably better than a Brio as far as the look goes. The big thing I'm concerned about is good audio, and making sure that the audio sounds really good. And we've gotten pretty good at that. That's the first thing to know, is that we'll be, as we get this working, we'll be a little fluid. By the end of November, you'll have a radio style mic. It can be USB or something, but it'll be radio style mic, or you won't be on the panel. So there won't be any, we'll stop accepting AirPods in computer mics. Like all of that's that'll be the first thing that we kind of taper off. Is that process. So it's the microphones are the biggest thing that I'm, because I feel like that makes the show. A lot of us, like when I'm listening to After Hours, we're not doing that with After Hours. I know that everyone's just probably gonna panic when I say that. Oh no, I have to invest to be on After Hours. That's not the case. But when I listen to After Hours and there's a bunch of us talking that all have good mics, wow, is it pleasurable. Like, it's just like a radio show. It's actually better than radio because, we're not, NPR is always like a stupid phone calls, that are coming in that sound tinty and messy. And bad Skypes and everything else. And so I think that, we have the opportunity to have that. And I think that a lot of people listen to it like radio. And so I think we want to really think about that. And I will predict that by the end of next year, 80% of our audience will be listening to it. That's my prediction. We'll not be watching it. They'll be listening to it. So, and they'll be listening to it all over the world, because once we get Office Hours 2.0 stabilized, I'm going to start making it available for radio broadcast. So the idea is, if you're a radio station, there's a lot of AM radio stations in the United States, and you want to put a program on, you could put it on. so like you could just, like it's something that you can. And in the United States, it has some possibilities. In other parts of the world, they don't have a lot of new content. You'd be surprised. So it could be 80, it could be 90, it could be 95% a radio show. So that's why we're going to focus really heavily on audio. So I don't think the camera is as much of a deal, but I do think that it will be. I mean, the bottom line is that we're going to be looking at everything, the cross section of how often these panels, because what we have to do, what I think is going to happen is we only have a certain number of outputs in our system right now. So we are going to be capped out at 20, possibly 24, eventually, people can be in the panel. When we start pushing office hours down the path, I think that there'll be more than that want to be in the panel every day. And what we're working on is an invite system that allows you to basically get, we'll invite, people and say, just, are you available? It will be more than what we have, but it'll be kind of first come, first serve. So people get an invite for next Tuesday or next Wednesday or whatever, and they'll sign up to say that they're coming. So we have some idea who's showing up, and for the people, who, once we fill that up, then it's full, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I love the fact that Tuesdays has these audio gurus in it, and the specialist days. So if we can stick with that days have these experts in it, I think that's just from a professional standpoint is wonderful.
Yeah, I'd like to try to hone that more. I think that we did it well and we started going down that path when we had Chris Summers, doing the so we were really going down a video path, and I've been trying to make Wednesday video. It's just been hard. And then Thursday, in my eyes, is usually a more talent, event. That's how I try to put that in. Of course, Saturday is education. Education is 100% that way. Like, the first hour is a little bit of everything, but when the educators come in the second hour, it's a full on discussion about it, which is really interesting. So anyway, so I think that's, I want to have it be that way. The second hours are really something. It's hard for me to program, and so that's part of it now. Is that, and again, I've been fortunate enough that Own I Know is going to let me loosen my work for the rest of the year, so I can work on this and a couple other things, but I'm not going to be in this kind of crushing schedule that has slowed things down a little bit for the rest of the year. So you'll see a lot of movement, and then but a lot of that movement is not me trying to do more. It's me trying to organize everybody who wants to contribute to be part of the process. And so I just haven't had time. It takes time to hand things off effectively, and so that's part of what we're working on. Tony, you were going to talk about
yeah. Part of the reason that I asked the question is because I see this as an opportunity, because all of us, I shouldn't say all of us, because I'm not really a video professional, but as you guys get more work, I see that there might be a need for new people to come in to the panel, because you guys might have actual work that you're doing and not be able to participate in the panel like you are now. Mm-hmm. And so, you want to be able to bring in new people so that when everyone gets work or is doing projects, that, you still have a quality panel and everybody still looks good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that we need to be constantly looking at what that is. And that's why we're not going to have the camera and the lighting in the background be one of the hard requirements for being part of it. It's just the audio. So and that can be solved with, and there, I think there has to be a commitment to some degree, to what we have to always think about, the listeners of this, and making sure that they're getting that quality experience, because nothing else is going to matter if they don't like it. So we have to, think through that process. Go ahead, Leo.
Myself and a couple of others on After Hours have been experimenting with one microphone in particular, which is this Samson, the Q2U, which is a dynamic mic, but it's a USB dynamic mic, and also has XLR. And listening to one of the others on there today, they sounded absolutely great on this mic, and it's it's about $80, and it comes with its USB and everything. I'd like you to, if you haven't tried it, try it and see what you think.
I think I might have had one, but I'll see if I can. I know I bought Samsons in the past. There's usually been some kind of stopgap of, I need a mic, and I think that's what I believe the Samsons are what we sent out to schools. Like we would send those out to schools, so where, students are talking to the, we specifically sent, I think it was Samsons, but it was a mic like that with USB, because we needed something that was easy for them to set up. They can just plug it into a computer. They don't have to think about it. And the requirements for the show is the other side had to hear them very clearly, or they wouldn't be able to understand what they were saying, because they were in space. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Audio-Technica 2100 was the other one. That's the hybrid microphone style. Just so you know.
Let's go to the next question.
This question is from Douglas Carmichael. Will community building elements of office hours that promote cohesion, like the remotes, continue in the 2.0 era, as long as we have sufficient musicians of appropriate skill and interest to sustain the band?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, again, you've heard me requote Alex's comment about content is king, and the response back was, no, community is king and content is the honey that draws it together. And what remotes were doing were, as Chris Fenwick says, an affinity group of like-minded people with a similar interest. And so office hours has created a inspiration, I think. So what I'm seeing is office hours is the inspiration that after hours is continuing to nurture. And so consequently is a group of musicians gathering together to fulfill, create a thing. That's just one example. But again, the pie was another example. The food was a different example. So I think different communities will come and go depending on people's interest. So I'm grateful for this nutrient-rich environment that I think if somebody wants to try something and somebody else wants to come along and support, we're a very supportive group of people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're only going to see more collaboration rather than less. So I think that the remote's kind of pioneered something that we're going to hopefully keep on expanding on. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker with the Big Pier by the Sea. Will poll results be displayed in the video?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think we could definitely get to that. We'll have a flexible graphics system that will be able to receive data on the fly. We were having this conversation earlier this week about, the way that 2.0 is designed. You have this periphery of devices and software that are each have a little bit of data, right? Like Mukana knows what current question we're on, how people want their name style, what the poll results are. Zoom knows who's talking right now, who's got their video on, things like that. Then Isadora is the brain that sort of consolidates that and then pushes out relevant information in the context that's useful. So I can see a world where we set up a page in the Mukana API to grab the poll result, comes into Isadora, and then gets pushed up into the graphics system when TD in universe triggers that action. So, we're building this out very much with this sort of modular design in mind, so that each program does what it does best, but Isadora holds all the states inside of itself.
Yeah, and again, the goal for us is to not only figure it out, but to make it more available to everyone else. So we'll, as we keep on doing it, we're going to talk to everyone about how all these pieces are coming together, and make it hopefully keep on expanding. Next question.
Andy Carlosio from Washington in DC. How technical should the TD interface for 2.0 be? Looking for a discussion on how much abstract to automate versus pass through to the UI.
I think we're going to find it, to some degree, on that process. I would love to have a way that a TD can say, I need you to just auto cut for a little while for me. Like it's not like an autopilot system that would let it, like for instance, we know that we know that when the super source should go up. We know that, when we go to questions, we're probably going to go to the gallery, and we can set up a set of rules. Like if they hit autopilot, when someone hits answer, when someone hits the next answer question or whatever, it's going to go out to the gallery. And then when we click on the first person's name in the back end, it's going to go to the super source. Like it's going to pop up to the super source there. And now that requires a little of us on our end to be clicking the right things inside of Mukana. But assuming that we click those things, it follows along that and it gets to the end of the fourth person. If we go to a fifth person, it goes back to the gallery. And it just, now, is it as good as a person doing it? No. But we want to make sure that it's something that it could just kind of run down the path. And in other discussions, it could go into discussion mode where it's all full frame, but it's doing basically like a Dugan auto mix, but with, just paying attention to who's talking and just cutting back and forth between the folks that are talking there. And then you'd want controls over being able to trim how it makes that decision. Go ahead, Leo.
I think the very interesting thing, and I don't know how it's going to be on the back end of this because of where you're going to use Zoom or not use Zoom. But one of the things I find, first of all, in this panel, because everybody is very, very good at muting their own mic, the control of the being able to use that sort of video follows audio almost works very well. When on a lot of things that I run, it's a disaster because you've just got open mics all over the place, even when you mute them out, and so you can't use it. But the other thing I find sometimes frustrating always is there's not enough of the rest of the panel on view. And I think sometimes I find that I need context of the other people and what they am I getting the vibe of whether this is, am I talking too long?
Well, and I think that's going to be for the panelists. You're always going to keep on seeing the gallery, right? Or if you choose to, because that doesn't change anything. That's the great thing about Zoom for what we're doing is the panelists have kind of control over their own viewing process. But for the viewer, I think that we are going to be going out to the panel view all the time, between every question, and it'll be kind of set up that way to kind of jump to that. So yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I guess and again, I think you're right, Alex, that we're going to find a lot of this as we go into the process. What I'm trying to understand as we start to build out the universe interface, the thing that actually you sit back and log into a web browser and actually interact with to control the system is, are we trying to build something that is kind of a one-to-one with a professional switcher layout? Or are we trying to build something that is like, kind of a hybrid of that, where like you can cut to your different inputs and you can cut to the different looks, but there's a fair amount of like, just play the right graphic, go, and then you hit that,
I think we definitely want to go that direction because we want to get to a point where someone can execute a show that isn't a TD. We don't need to show them all the controls that they have and everything else, because the goal here, my goal with Office Hours 2.0 is not that we know how to do it. It's that at first we do it with one show. Then we do it with many shows within Office Hours. So many of the folks that are here start taking on the system and running it on their own, and we refine it even further. And then at some point we make it a thing that people can use, and anybody who wants to run their event could use that system, and we figured out what that means. I don't even know what that means. It's a long way away. So it'll be Office Hours folks only for quite some time, just because it'll take time to figure out how to support it and what to do with it. But the idea is that it would make it available so that people can have a great event and have it be something that's much closer to broadcast, but without the complexity of broadcast. I mean, you look at a broadcaster, you sit in front of a 4ME Sony switcher or 8ME, Grass Valley. You're not going to get a teacher doing that. So like sitting down, I can't sit down and do it. So we need to find a way that a lot of that complexity is abstracted from the user, and made more available. So, and we'll keep on adding things. I think that one of the things that I like in interfaces is kind of a light, medium, advanced. So there's a way to kind of flip the mode of what that looks like. And I know that gets into a lot more development, so we have to kind of think about what that looks like. But you can slide in a bunch of extra detail if you have the skills or you want more control, but you can also just have it everything from auto run to someone who has less experience to someone who might want to open it up and be able to cut harder than what the system is designed for. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to throw out the ATEM Mini as a beginning interface because it's, there's a lot of depth behind it. And then the question is, obviously with a computer, you can just toggle open or pop-up menu something that goes deeper and deeper. I don't know if that will slow down the operation of the individual interface, but nonetheless, I'd just say start there to keep the buttons fairly simple and straightforward, and then work your way into depth.
I think the problem with the Mini is actually with all the Minis is there's too many buttons. There's so many buttons on that thing that I don't use.
I'd
rather use the software.
Not an Extreme Pro,
Even
ISO, the $395 Mini. If somebody doesn't understand that number of buttons, then I would say they may not want them. I don't know.
I think part of putting all the buttons on there was to make you feel like you had value, because if I want to do most of the things that are on those buttons, I do them in software. Like I don't touch the actual switcher because they just get too small and nibbly, and you're in a live show, it's hard to figure out which, hard to hit them under stress. I do use a couple of them. So
you do them in software, but the third grade teacher is not going to ever get into the software. They're just going to see those buttons.
But I think all they're going to do is go from one source to another, but that's another. Yeah, Stuart?
A few minutes ago, you mentioned being able to share the Office 2.0 format and have multiple people contributed from different locations. The moment you're moving to using something like the ATEM as a switcher, it means whoever is switching needs the ATEM in front of them. So it needs to be a software-based interface in front that they can control.
Yeah, that's happening.
We're just talking for the interface, not for the actual physical. We're not talking about actually giving them ATEM.
Yeah, see, that worries me because you want something that's easy to control. A keyboard with stickers that lay over the back of it is better than sending out an ATEM Mini as a control panel to teachers.
We don't need to do that though. We all we need is a iPad interface that's talking to it. So a lot of that has been, a big part of this has been Mix Effect Pro updating a lot of the OSC commands. So all the OSC, Andy can probably elaborate some, but all the OSC commands are coming in from Isadora into Mix Effect Pro and then running the ATEM. So while there's an ATEM has to sit somewhere, it doesn't mean, and again, I know, every time I say this, everyone's like, you just do this in the cloud with vMix. I get it. But I need the product to do something that, so I need the product to do something at a higher level than what I can do online right now. I'm not saying that I can never do it online. I think that in a year from now or 2 years from now, this is all going to be in the cloud. Like, so I'm 100% like this will all be in the cloud in a couple, in a couple of years. But what I needed to do is a higher level of, and I don't know if everybody needs that, but I do think that there's a value for office hours for us to, over the next 2 months, build a show that looks better and sounds better and pushes the outer envelope of quality on, in addition to just having a great conversation. So I think that's part of why we're using the hardware. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm assuming when you say iPad, you mean a browser-style interface, so it can be Android or whatever. And just an aside, how you mentioned vMix in the cloud, I won't tell you who told me, but the AWS people here in Australia had no idea that was possible.
Yeah,
no idea at all.
There's a lot of people in AWS that don't know that. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, even the Google people don't even know, and I've got it running over there too. Besides that, if you strip down vMix, Livestream, Wirecast, all of them have a beginner or what I call a volunteer mode, because a lot of times you do get a house of worship where it's just like, hey, who can cut this show? Mm-hmm. And you do want it super simple. The problem that I see with these tablets and these touch screens is that if you're doing a multi-day event, it's grueling. It is grueling to not have a button. So Andy, if you can, I mean, I would do the regular buttons for on-screen or a touchscreen or an iPad, but really be thinking about if we can ship somebody a $149 device, because if this is going out to the public to do multi-day events, you're going to kill people. I mean, it's too much to try and remember. You need that muscle memory and having those little nubs on a button so you can just, relax a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to get some missed punches.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, we see people put the software, the ATEM software, on a big touch screen, and we're always like, well, that's not going to work. So it's definitely like we just like, that's cute. But yeah, I think that, again, in the early stages, one of the things that's always a danger in development is to try to think of every possible thing that we could do with it and then try to build for that. So what we're building it for is a 2-hour show. You want to do a 2-hour show or a 3-hour show. Like, what would that look like? I do agree with you, though, that eventually, having that tablet be able to, and again, it's just a, if we just put the hooks into it that you can, grab onto it in universe, I think that that's a doable thing. I mean, Andy can probably elaborate, but
Yeah, I think, we'd keep it simple at first and say, the web page is set up to receive keyboard macros, and then ship the Stream Deck with a profile in the Stream Deck app that just triggers those macros. So it goes, from the Stream Deck to the browser, to the cloud, to the ground, versus trying to like session their Stream Deck into the remote cloud instance just for simplicity at the beginning. But I do agree there's something to be said for the tactile button. I think I'm very excited about the idea that we're going to be able to take the Universe front end and port it through Cloudflare so that it's just sitting on a password on a browser that anybody can hit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing is we're moving past what we've done in the past where we need a VPN or you need to know something about, whatever. It's literally just going to be, here's the password, you're in, like here, you're now able to control the, control the show, and potentially, one of the things we might want to look at some point is spreading that out. Like, so we can possibly build different interfaces depending on how big the team is, where one team is managed, because even in this case, you're going to have, and because other teams are having effects on the show. So for instance, there's someone managing the questions and how the super sources get built are actually driven from Mukana, not from a TD. So that's one of the things that is kind of a crazy thing is that, we are taking away, when you think about having 16 people or 20 people or 24 people in a conversation, the interesting thing about that is that that right now most traditional edit systems could not do what we're doing very well, because they, how do you swap all the super sources that fast, and how do you, we're switching all the super sources every 3 minutes. That's a thing, right? And so it's a really interesting puzzle, to kind of figure out as we go down the path. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Try to use the tool instead of raising your hand. I'm trying to suppress people from doing that. But anyway, go ahead, Chris.
I know. Something that's been occurring to me with the super sources being built automatically is, as a viewer, I develop a relationship with the screen, and I know that, Preto is in this box and Rupert's in that box. Is there any way to apply some sort of AI, I hate that term, but any sort of smarts, so that when it takes the 16 most recent people, that it kind of defaults to try and put people in a spot if possible, so that Alex is always in this box, Rupert's always in that box.
Well, it's not going to randomize it. It's going to take the last person who hadn't been talking for a while and replace them with the new person that's talking. So it will move in the same way that Zoom makes kind of subtle changes that way as well. I mean, I think it'll be similar to that, where it's moving but not very much. It's not like it's constantly flowing, in that process.
It should move less than Zoom. Right now, Zoom will take you out and put you at the bottom and shuffle everybody up. This is a popcorn replacement. It's going to find you if you're the least frequent, and then it's going to switch you to the most frequent. And so it's going to, but to your point, what that does give you the disadvantage of is that we can't funnel. Like, I can't necessarily say, Alex, you belong in a certain box unless I give the TD on their end the ability to do this matrix routing, which I wonder, is that too much? I guess that's it's a philosophical question, and I think we've spent a good chunk of time on it, but I'm going to constantly have to be thinking about, like, how deep do we need to go? And maybe it's multiple interfaces. Maybe that's the end solution, is that there's something that's really all the dials and knobs, but it's sort of a back end.
I think that I was thinking about it while we were talking, and I don't even know if I want to have it be one interface that you change. It might be just 3 URLs, and those URLs are, manage different things, so that you might be able to have, in that way you can also, not only can a more advanced person take on a more advanced thing, but a different team can take on some part of the show, where they just have an interface. I think that we may end up developing individualized interfaces for, different teams that can be turned on or off, like, oh, we're not going to make that available in today's show, but if we want to expand it. My biggest complaint with software editing tools is the lack of real support for larger teams, where an individual is managing one specific part of that thing. So I think that the idea that we could slowly get to a point where, if we want to expand to 40 people working on the show, or maybe not office hours, but a show using the system, you could have 40 people working on it seamlessly without any kind of everybody's got their own little bit that they're working on, which will create an incredible show, and, so yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Oh yeah, I was going to go back to my ATEM mini model or whatever. So the 1 up to me is speaker view, or basically let the show, and then your second button is a 2 up and a 3 up, and so it's going to select all the stuff in the background. So I really just think 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, 4 up.
Well, and really it's the what will define how many 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, 4 up is depending on how many people signed up for that question. So what'll happen is when it hits answer. When we hit answer, it just says, "Oh, I got 4 people. I'm going to build a 4 up." It doesn't.
Exactly.
The TD doesn't have to think about that at all.
Exactly. So all they need is 4 buttons. And then my last question is the gallery also a selection? Will there be
we should be able to cut to the gallery anytime we want.
And will there be real quick? Are there able to be overlays on individuals in the gallery?
We were talking about that recently. Yeah, we should have the ability. So the gallery is going to be a 1080 gallery, so it's going to be composited in the hardware, so we lose the yellow box. So how do we show the person who's speaking? I think that's going to be a tie-in from the graphics system. That's going to be a composited overlay with that smart gallery, so that we identify the speaking person through ZoomOSC, and then we sort of emphasize. I don't know exactly graphically what that means, but somehow the overlay is less over there, or we grow the box, or something like that. That emphasizes who's talking in the 16 up gallery.
Yeah, and so but we can definitely put straps on people that are, because we know where everybody is. We'll get rid of these blacks, the ones that we see here in the gallery.
I was just trying to take one step further. If there could actually be a stoplight on everybody's overlay, so that says green, you're a go. Yellow, you're up next. Red, stop talking. Or something along those lines.
Well, if they have the Mukana interface open, they should know what the order is. That's the.
I agree, but I just thought anyways.
Yeah, but some kind of tally return. So there's some limitations to what Zoom can do as far as a return back to the viewer, and we're already talking about what that will look like someday. My goal is to eventually have a heads-up display for that's a return, like basically overlaid over the return video that you get you're getting a whole bunch of data. And I don't think that data necessarily has to be in video. I think that it could be done in different ways. So we're thinking through that. Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I just realized the iteration of a software. Sorry, a little far away from the mic. The iteration of a software. I remember early days of the Avid. They would give the entire product out there, but you would be only given access to a certain portion that you paid for. And so when Alex mentioned, do we give everything to everybody, and then the training of this, that to Roscoe's point of a 3rd grade teacher only needs 2 buttons to do a thing. Yep. So I'm just curious about this next steps.
I think that it's going to be really interesting to see where we go with it. I think we do need to have a relatively simple, a near auto version, a simple version, a intermediate version, and an advanced version. I don't think we're going to get that all at one time. We'll figure out probably somewhere in the medium version, not too advanced, not too light, that just kind of that just right middle ground to start with. And then we'll keep figuring out what we need to do to make it more, give us more detail where we want it and more automation when we want it. But it also, figuring this out, part of what is so important to me about this is it changes the nature of a broadcast, because, right now broadcasts are limited to 3 or 4 pundits, and the idea that we could create something that anybody could seamlessly build a discussion with 16, 20, 25 people it literally changes how we think about discussing ideas. But the key is the tools that we're developing here don't exist anywhere else in the world. And so it's what makes it all kind of work. Next question.
Dirk Brewer in Guatemala. I understand that you'll be using YouTube and Mukana as the interface for the audience. Has Zoom fallen short to provide what comes in Office Hours 2.0, spatial AV, and why?
You can't embed a video into. You can't embed Zoom, like the Zoom window, into a web page. That's what's missing. So if we were able to do that, we would use Zoom, for that. Also, YouTube is free. So if we scale, it becomes more of a problem there. So anyway, the cool thing about Mukana is that what sits in that window can change in a day. Like literally today it can be one thing and tomorrow it can be another. It's an embed code. So whether it's going to be our own Akamai output or AWS output or YouTube or whatever we want, that can be shifted. One of the things I'm looking at is possibly utilizing. We may start thinking about the super low latency inside of YouTube for it, so that way it would tie. It's one of the places where it might make sense. I'm usually against it, but it might make sense because we're not doing things that are highly graphical that could break up a little bit if it happened. And number two is it would mean that the audience is still only 2.5 seconds delta, which is in a discussion like this almost is nothing. So I think but the 20 seconds may be problematic. So we may shift, how we manage that. Next question.
Andy Colosio in Washington, D.C. How can we lower the amount of time between calling on someone and having them unmute in Zoom? We have a super low latency conversation in Zoom, but some of that flow is lost in unmuting. Do we need to start automating this?
Go ahead, Liam.
So I think the problem, well, it's not a problem, but one of the ways around it is, as a panelist, is to actually be watching and to unmute yourself before you're actually called upon. But I don't think we should be answering questions until being called. So in theory, I could just sit there and go, oh, it's me next. And as I can see, it's going to be Roscoe straight after. And I could pass it. But that isn't, I think that breaks a chain that the audience will not understand why it's suddenly gone in that direction.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Okay, I was ready to unmute about 4 times. Every time Leo comes to the end of the sentence, I don't know if he's going to continue on. But as soon as he gets to that, where it ended the question, I unmute myself while Alex is saying, and now Roscoe. So I think it's on the panelists to make sure that they're just staying on the ball to get that unmuted. Doing it automatically would be great, but I think the panelists can
Go ahead, Rupert.
up their game.
So, I mean, automating seems kind of attractive when you look at it, but I think, you're going to have that same set of challenges while we're using Zoom for the permissions and the unmute thing. I think even the API still requires that permission be given by the far end. And you could run into problems that way too. If somebody's not ready to be unmuted or they forget, then you could get some surprises there too.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the only issue I can see is fragmentation, and somebody accidentally unmutes. We see it in Zoom all the time, especially if you try to Zoom mute, and like I'm talking, let's say Rupert just muted, all of a sudden it pops over to him and comes back to us. So that's a tough thing to figure out.
Good, Tony.
So I tried to do that real quickly this time. I know that I normally probably one of the slowest persons to unmute. And the reason why I'm having such a difficulty is that there's something about this particular mouse that I'm using, and I'm going to switch it out. But the question I had is, should we be using a device that unmutes rather than trying to do it with a mouse?
My opinion is that we should automate it. So what we should do is basically, create a situation. I think that we ought to have at least a mode that is available, that we go into whatever we call focus mode or whatever, and it's all driven from Mukana. So when I click on your name, it unmutes you and mutes everybody else, and literally it just knocks it. Like it's just constantly muting and unmuting as it goes through. And because we're not doing this with people we don't know, this is panelists. This is I can just say, if we can't do that with you, you can't be on the panel. like that's easy enough to do, but the idea is that you have we just have a system that we just constantly are unmuting and muting based on it. If you put your hand up, what you know is that when that question comes up, it's going to come to you, and it's going to open up your mic. I think that that's a relatively, again, that is not acceptable for a general meeting that you have with civilians. I think it is acceptable for a show with people who have an expectation to talk, who are set up to talk, who have been validated to talk. I think that taking that out of there, having them have to figure out where to click or what to do or whatever, you just take that out where it just automatically is just opening and closing the mics. I think once we get ISO audio too, we can get to a point where, whenever that happens, we can keep on praying. But once we get that can be done in the hardware as well. So it can just be, so we can decide whether it's always open or always closed or whatever that is. But I think it's best to close it on the far end to do that. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you just covered it, but I thought maybe a mute all is more important. So you're actually tracking who the active speaker is, and then it's just a simple button push. Everyone else goes away, except for maybe Alex.
Right.
Or
But that would be
reverse.
the idea, is that we occasionally get these wild mics. And so the idea is that it just automatically, whoever's talking, it just pushes turns everybody else's mic off except for the host, obviously. And but pushes that off and opens but now what that also means is that somebody on the back end has to be playing hard. We have the ability to do that, but I didn't do it with you. I'm trying to keep up with that. So we'd have to have somebody, able to kind of click on it. And I think something just got broken. Anyway, Chris is obviously working. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just a thought, if we go down the automation route, like you said, if there's somebody on the back end, but I think that we need a very accessible, quick override function. If something gets automatically unmuted and something goes wrong, both the panelist and the host or somebody needs a really quick mute action.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that we also, as we test that system, we're going to have the host know that, you're on and we're testing it. You may end up with an open mic by accident. So we just have to kind of be ready for that. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, last thing I was going to say on this was that to me, I see it having two benefits to trying to accelerate both the tightness of the conversation, taking advantage of the fact that we have a low latency conversation, but also for me, the mental pretzel of making sure whatever it is, even if it's a physical button that I use to unmute myself, it just sort of is a little stumble right before I get into my statement. I know for me, it kind of scrambles me mentally as I'm like trying to do that. So just if I had the knowledge that, I could sit back in my chair and have the conversation and know that it would come through, with the host having the ability to unmute us automatically, because that's one of the rules of the meeting, and ZoomOSC being able to manage that for you with the Mukana, you're answering now button being the action. I think I could see that being attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Next question is Rupert McRae from Dallas in Texas. The Office Hours 2.0 panel will show the last 16 people to have spoken, but how will it start?
Andy?
Yeah, so I think to literally answer your question, we'll start by just grabbing 16, essentially random people, but we'll turn it on during the pre-show. And so it'll have a little bit of training about, from, the 30 minutes prior to be able to kind of warm up a bit, but so it's not coming in totally cold when we start.
Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
Can you set it up so you have your panel set before you start? So if somebody starts talking, it doesn't switch over?
Well, it's still just 16. So if someone starts talking, it might flip up one window, and again, what we're probably going to do is start getting into, at least to start with, I'm more interested in the invite system, where we're probably going to invite 20 people, for each day, and with some WoW and Flutter, accounted for. But I don't think there'll be that many people. So it'll only be one window, and it would have to be. So if you think of it that way, there's like a 75% chance that anybody talking will already be in that window. And if someone else talks, it'll just flip one little window to accommodate that, which is what Zoom does. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. Alex, when you mentioned radio style mics, does the mic have to be in the shot?
It doesn't, but we're always going to lean towards really high quality audio. So we'll push harder for people to, I guess what I would say is that I culturally want people to be comfortable with having the mic in the shot. And so we get better audio. So as you move the mic away from it, you're going to get more and more room. So if you've got a room that it can accommodate it, I think it's fine. If you don't have a room that it can accommodate it, then I think that you'll need to move it closer. Mine is a little noisy, so I move my mic closer. I could probably move it away further if I had less stuff going on in my room. Go ahead, Leo.
So I look at this very similar to when you go into a doctor's surgery and you see the certificates hanging up on the wall, and it shows that the authority of what they're actually delivering. I actually think that people are getting more and more used to seeing the mics in the shot, and they're seeing quality mics in the shot.
Right.
It's not just here. I'm seeing it more and more in the meetings that I have with people, that they're they're realizing it is making a difference. It's part of the scene setting, and whether they are authoritative in what they do.
I do. I at least one meeting a day, someone goes, I really want that mic. And part of it is they're seeing the mic and then they're hearing the audio and they're like, oh, this sounds so much better than everybody else in the meeting. So part of why I want the mics in the shot, I admit, is that there's a little bit of shaming everybody else into getting good mics. So people see, oh, wow, these mics look good. Like they sound really good. And it tells people that there's a professional mic behind that process. Now I do it purely technically. I just like the mic the way it sounds at this distance. But I definitely like to encourage people to put mics on, have mics in their system, because it pushes everybody else in the meeting, because you will sound way better. And then they connect that very quickly to the mic that they can see in the frame. and so it's very clear to them why you sound better. And then hopefully they get the message. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers from Madison in Wisconsin. Will comms be used and will everyone be able to listen in on the channel?
Go ahead, Sky.
I guess I immediately went to the concept of a police scanner. The police needed to communicate to each other to do their job, but a scanner would allow you to listen in from the outside. And so to keep communications for those in the back end to do their job, it'd be great.
Yeah.
But,
so we probably won't do it day one, but we're definitely going to move towards having, number one is Tucker's already volunteered to build any comm system that we want to run this. So there's already, and I'm sure that Jim would help as well if we needed it as well. So we've got, Unity as far as something that we can spread out and make it something that just turns on and ties everybody in. So it'll be either Jim's system or Tucker's system or somebody's system that's going to build this big envelope. Everyone working in the production will absolutely be in comms. So all the TD and the people working on the graphics and working, because it's going to be a huge global dance of, hey, do you got a graphic for me? I got one for you. Look at this. Da, 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 da. There's all these things that are going on, and so they'll all go back and forth as we figure that all out. Then in addition to that, we will open. What will end up happening is there'll be the goal. At least I don't know when I say end up happening. What I think will happen next is that there'll be a breakout room in after hours that is office hours, right? So so this panel will event not next week. So if you're looking for something new next week, this is going to still be the place to go for at least one more week, maybe two. But sometime in November, we'll switch over where basically the goal is we'll test it and see if it works. But the goal will be that there'll be a breakout room inside of after hours will be eventually all that exists, right? And you go through it. The panelists all come into the main session, hang out with everybody for a little while, and then when they get ready for mic checks, they all file into a breakout room. And so in the breakout room, they'll do the show, right? Like they're in that show there. There'll be another breakout room that if you want to listen to comms and watch the back end and see the multi-view and see the other stuff that's all there, it's all displayed, for you. So if you want to watch office hours through the back end, you can do that as well. Which, by the way, is just another way to watch the show, because I watched a game recently through the back end. And that was the fastest 2 hours I've ever seen. Like it was just like boom, like it was just going, because I was paying it, because I could hear all the cutting, I could see all the stuff, I could see the graphics getting prepped, I could do all the other stuff, and it was just a really fast way to watch a game. So I think that you can you might just like to watch it that way, and that's fine. So you'd watch it in Zoom, as a viewer, but you'd be able to hear the comms and hear everything else that's going on. That's also our way to train people. So in case you're wondering, so you can sit there and watch it. And then when you decide that you really want to do it, you can say, hey, I want to take on being on the graphics team or on the second hour team or on the whatever it is, but you're not coming into it cold, like not understanding how it works. This is a soft way to prep people. So when they join, now they just have to be taught what to do, but they've seen and heard people doing it and they understand what that process is and everything else. So that's going to be the next step, for that. But so to make a shorter answer really, really long, that's the goal there. Next question.
From Rupert McRae in Dallas in Texas. If the Office Hours 2.0 hardware stack has to be relocated from 090, where would or could it go?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people could actually even pull this off, but I have the infrastructure sitting there, and then I'm also a Blackmagic reseller, so I'm able to get stuff at cost. So depending on all the numbers, how they add up, I could possibly volunteer to have the duplicate system, Mac Minis, Constellation, the whole nine.
Yeah, and I definitely want to eventually, once we get it running, the key is to figure it all out and figure out how it all runs. And then if there's demand, and eventually what we'd want to do is build one somewhere else, and it might be at Guy's, eventually it might be, we might have a couple of them. And we have to figure out redundancy, like how does Universe talk to two different systems at the same time so that they can all be running in redundantly, down the path. So that theoretically you could have two different systems running at the same time. Running the same show. or a slightly different show. We have different versions of the show that are the all full screen. Like you get to a point where like, I want to watch the all full screen version, or I want to watch this version. So that there could be a bunch of different things that we could do there. But yeah. So we'll, thanks Guy, and we'll might talk to you more about that. All right. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette in Indiana. Is the center stage camera on the iPad good enough quality for panelist usage?
Go ahead, Rupert.
Again, I think there's a tendency to sort of label equipment as the passing grade rather than the results that it delivers. The iPad, the center stage particularly, I mean, if you've got that on the auto tracking, your frame's going to be all over the place. It's obviously digitally zooming in a little bit, so you've got to look at what that may be doing to your image. iPads, okay, if you've got it mounted up nicely, square on, then you might get better results. But a lot of people are using iPads on the desk, looking up, tracking all over the place. So you could tune it maybe to give you a good image, plenty of light, but it's a lot of work. And then as a panelist, are you going to use that as your device, or are you going to interact then on the panel in a different thing? So it's a whole big set of circumstances there.
I think it'll be good enough quality. I think that its framing is a little funny, like it frames with a lot of headroom. So that's the only thing. If they could fix that, it would be a lot better. But I'm always like, why is it giving me so much headroom? So anyway, next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas in Texas. If Office Hours 2.0 gets streamed to multiple platforms, which will be the best place to watch in terms of video quality? And what is the biggest screen size you would like to see the stream on? 80-inch, 100-inch?
Yeah. The best at first will be YouTube. And then the question will be whether we shift to either AWS as a feed or Akamai, and that'll depend on them mostly. That I can't afford to do it on my own. So if they're willing to sponsor what we're doing and let us do that process, we may move to that, and that would allow me to go to Vision and Atmos, for the stream in 4K. But the highest quality will probably be YouTube in the short term because it'll be 4K it'll be 4K with good audio. So anyway, so that'll be probably the highest quality to start with. But yeah, I'd love to get to a point where it holds its own at 80 inches or 100 inches. I think that'd be really cool. So again, especially when you look at the super sources where everyone's scaled down a little bit and then you have 4K graphics around it, I think you're going to end up with something that looks really good, on a big screen. So I think it'll be really interesting. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Andy, you mentioned flying from Dallas to LAX and getting a hotel to work in the last few pieces of Office Hours 2.0. With the remote first mindset, have we exposed? Couldn't you have done most of that work remotely?
Go ahead, Andy.
Flaming hypocrite. No, for me, I think at first it's a testament to the fact that I only had to fly out twice to be able to do the majority of this.
Right.
I was able to get a lot of it done remotely over the past couple of months in between my first time out and my second time out. The other thing is, we're doing this as volunteers. And so for me, it signals to my colleagues when I'm taking time off and flying out for a week that I actually can't be distracted and work on other things. This is me cutting myself off from everything else that I would be doing if I were here. I have to physically get out of this place in order to be able to focus an entire week of time on the project. It's more of a wetware thing than a necessity. I will say, though, it's nice to be able to physically interact with the hardware. It is a hardware system. We might be in a different boat if we were building this cloud first, but because there is a hardware component to it, lowering the friction of not having to go through and sort of puppet JJ in order to be able to get what I need done. It's nice to be able to be there in person. There's a lot of peripheral benefits and things like that. It wouldn't, strictly speaking, be necessary, but from a social perspective, to signal to my colleagues that I'm taking time off, I'm focusing on this. It keeps the emails low. It keeps the emergency things that I get pulled into low. Helps me really focus on the project to get out of town.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back again with, what is the role of Universe versus Isadora? Can Isadora's control panel conceivably replace Universe?
Go ahead, Andy.
So it's the reverse, actually, that we want to do here. Isadora does have a control interface. It's pretty good, but it's old. The buttons are kind of old looking. It's a very 90s, early 2000s design style. So what we're actually doing is we're having Universe build out this very pretty UI with reactive feedback and all of that. But at the back end of Universe, it's just button to OSC, slider to OSC. All of that stuff just turns into OSC. Then that OSC flows into Isadora and actually pilots it. So you can kind of think of Universe as being the front end to Isadora. The other benefit of using Universe is that it has the ability to port its controller to a web address. So when we combine that with the Cloudflare tunnel, we're actually able to take the interface of the Universe application running remotely and port that to a place that anybody can log into and run, which you can't do with Isadora. With Isadora, you'd have to remote session into the instance somehow, parsec, TeamViewer, that kind of thing. With Universe being on the web, and Jonas showed this a couple episodes back that you might want to go see, how he took Companion and put it on a publicly addressable URL. It's the same idea as Companion. It's an application that's running, that's hosting its interface on the web. So by doing that, we're able to then generate the OSC in the cloud, and then Streamweaver sends it down to the ground. We might even be able to run Universe terrestrially at the beginning and just port something on the 090 network if we're allowed to. So it allows us to do a lot of stuff very flexibly and with pretty buttons and things like that.
And the way that we're building the system, there's just so much possibility. We can be literally affecting lights and physical things in the real world through the system. So it's just there's a lot of really interesting possibilities as far as we're. At first, it's going to be just making it smoother, but we can have a lot of fun. Next question.
Brewer in Guatemala, there are annoying features of YouTube which can discourage seeing Office Hours 2.0, such as ads and when it is no longer heard when the cell phone goes to the screen lock and the application starts transmitting. How do you see these users staying involved? Go ahead, Leo. Well, I actually agree. This is a real problem with everything that we're doing with YouTube at the moment, or I'm doing with YouTube. YouTube and Facebook have changed their algorithms so that anytime on a mobile phone, if you lock, unless you're paying for it, you lose the sound. There was a trick away to get around it with Periscope, but that's also now gone away. And I think they're pushing you that way. It's actually surprisingly expensive, YouTube, in comparison to other streaming platforms, and it will be interesting to see how you solve it. Go to Roscoe.
If the content is compelling, then the user will overcome all those barriers.
Yeah, and I think that we're not always going to be on a web app or anything else. I mean, eventually, we'll probably develop an app that lets you view it and interact with it and ask questions and listen to it when it's locked, and all those things are things that we can do, that we don't have to do all the things that YouTube do. So there'll be other ways to watch it as well, especially on mobile. I'm pretty focused on that. So because I see the ability of an app, like the app on mobile to start with. What I'm really interested in there is the idea that you can interact with a TV, like so you can ask questions, but you could also theoretically have it standalone and listen to it and so on and so forth. So I think, and having a more stable interface than the web page is important. So anyway, so that probably will be coming down the path. Go ahead, Roscoe.
No, I already answered.
Okay, sorry. Sometimes I lose track of it. Go ahead. Last question.
Last question is from Rupert McRae from Dallas in Texas. Will Office Hours 2.0 have major minor releases 2.1, 2.2?
I think we're just going to be adding stuff every day.
They're called Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's our version number.
Yeah, Monday. We might have to just put the date in the version number or something. Like it's just 10.23 is the 23rd of whatever. But yeah, like
can't you just put final and that will be
we just add a final every day. Yeah.
It'll be generic .final is the perfect version 3. Yeah, exactly. That's how we'll set that up. But yeah, it's we're going to be, especially over the first 2 months, but then ongoingly, you're going to probably see updates almost every day, and that will create some chaos. I admit, but I think it's a necessary. We just want to keep evolving. We change things almost every day in Mukana. A lot of them are really minor and things for me or whatever. We sometimes go through a week or two that slows down for a bit, but there's lots of little tweaks that are just constantly going on. So it's just kind of this agile development. We take agile, like some people call things agile, and it's just there's a bunch of courses on it and everything else. This is the ultimate agile development. It's kind of like, oh, let's just add a button here. Oh, we don't like that. Let's take that out. So there's just lots of little back and forth, and you'll see that happening over the next couple months. It should be exciting. Anyway, there we go. So that gives people an idea how we're thinking about it and getting some of your input. And I think it's going to be exciting. I think the next 2 months and the next year is going to be pretty slick. So I think we're pretty excited about it. And again, I think that it's more than just we're doing a great show. We're all hanging out together. This is a different kind of content, and it needs these tools and this infrastructure to be successful. Not, people can't have to go through 570 some sessions to get to where we're at. I mean, if we're going to move the world, and I think that this is when you think about education, how great would it be to have a bunch of thinkers and educators all in one place answering questions as a group, as opposed to, when we think about, even when we get down to a lower number, like we would always tell people, never do a round table more than 5 people ever. Like it's always like we just push back on it for years. And so the idea that if we got down to 5 on this, I'm happy. Like, I don't know if I should do the show today. Like we've never been that low ever, And so the thing, and it's so hard, you can feel it as a host. I can feel it as our numbers get, I think 16 is like the sweet spot. 20 is good. As we go below 16 and we start dropping down, you can start feeling the more of the weight to answer the questions, because the questions are coming in all different ways and we get stumped. And as we get over, 24, we end up in a situation where there's just a lot of hands raised and we move slower through the questions and everything else. And so we're finding that kind of sweet spot. But imagine having that on a show, or on if you're learning, learning a lot of different things. You can ask questions and you have lots of people that can field the questions, and it just takes so much pressure off of one individual to make those questions. And we don't all align, which I think is great for the viewer. Is that the viewer gets a bunch of different opinions about what that looks like, not the authority, So I think that's.
But we keep trying, and today is 577.
There you go, closing in on 600. All right. Well, great work for the producers. Lots and lots of great, insightful questions, and obviously great for the panel. Great answers, great discussion as always. And we'll see you in after hours. Remember, we'll have education hour starting tomorrow, and the Belfast method. All right, see you.